kiddo. Show number 2 on a Monday. Before we had an awesome guest talking all about tech and blockchain and NFTs. But right now, I got an even crazier awesome guest that has an amazing book coming out via Ahoy Comics. It is called Snelson. Yeah, man. I'm happy to introduce the one and only Paul Constant. Yeah. What's up?
Hey,
How are you?
yeah, I'm all right. Thank you. I'm a big fan of the podcast.
Thank you, man. Thank you for actually joining me today and to talk about the greatness of this fantastic book that I actually had an opportunity to read just earlier today.
Okay.
Thanks to Hannah, and super fan for hooking this up today, and
Oh, they're
David.
the best.
Oh, they're amazing people, man,
Yeah.
and definitely show the love to Comic Crusaders 100. So I hope that we make you proud when you hook us up with these fantastic opportunities. So again, I'm your host, Mega, owner of and host of Comic Crusaders podcast and the ComicCrusaders.com website, as well as the UndercoverCapes.com website, my extended podcast family. And Paul, again, you have a fantastic book out that's going to be
Thanks.
coming out in August called Snelson, kind of a slice of life. It's comedy. I mean, comedy is dying. It's kind of how it goes. And man, do I agree with that sentiment wholeheartedly as a big fan of stand-up comedy and the things that are going on. I understand the narratives nowadays, but that shouldn't hurt comedy because comedy was actually one of those avenues that actually did help bring the truth of the situation with a slice of humor. But
hmm
people don't want to laugh anymore at serious things. How dare they?
hmm
So, Paul, a little bit about yourself, man. Where you hailing from?
I'm from Maine originally.
Oh,
Uh,
really? You're an East Coaster. There you go.
yeah,
Okay.
yeah, East Coasters. Born and raised in Maine, and grew up there. And pretty much as soon as I could get out of Maine, I went to Boston, and then I moved to Seattle in the year 2000. I've been here ever since. So,
Wow,
um,
man. 21 years on the West Coast, man. How is that over there?
I love it. I would, you know, respect, but I would never go back to the East Coast. I'm much more of a West Coaster.
I get you. Listen, I grew up in New York and then I spent several years in Massachusetts and Rhode Island.
Uh-huh.
So I was in Blackstone, Mass, and then
Okay.
and hit up Woonsocket. Let me say that right because if you say it wrong, they try to get at you over it.
Yeah, they're
But
gonna come for you.
they take those names seriously, folks.
They do.
That's cool, man. So that transition, man, how was it really overall moving from east to west? And were you a creator at that time? And how was that challenge?
Well,
If
I was a bookseller at the time, actually. I worked at a Borders in Boston, and then I came out to Seattle and started working at a bookstore called Elliott Bay Book Company. And so the creator side was pretty much out of it. I loved the West Coast, and living in Boston, it just felt like everybody thought they were the center of the universe. I just like laid back. Everybody's a little more laid back here, and the weather. I can't handle the winter anymore. I hate driving in the winter. So this is all great, and it was actually easier for me to become a writer out here than I think it would have been on the East Coast.
so,
Yeah.
tell me a little bit about that. So, what was it about the West Coast that inspired you then to become that writer, if you will?
Well, I always wanted to write, but I didn't want to have to kind of kiss ass all the way up the media chain, I guess.
Yeah.
So I got a job at an alternative weekly out here called The Stranger about 5 years after I moved here, and it was much easier for me to go from like an intern to the in
Yeah.
charge of the book section and all that. I didn't have to go to a fancy Ivy League school or anything like that. It was pretty much they liked me, they liked what I was writing, so it was much easier than like if I were to try the same thing at the Village Voice. I'm sure I'd still be getting somebody's coffee, you know.
Coffees and bagels, that bacon, egg, and cheese. Hey, I get it,
Hey,
man.
I do miss those.
Listen, though, they're not better than a bacon, egg, and cheese from New York. All right.
I know, I
I'm
agree.
from New Yorker, you know that and the pizza. Come on now. I mean,
Yeah.
Mass had these things. I remember when living in Mass, I asked for a roll, and they looked at me like I was insane. What the hell do you mean by a roll? Funny stuff. Hey,
Yeah.
that's what it is. So, all right. So let's get into that journey, though, that creative journey. So you move east to west. Um, you're doing what you got to do. Where was that itch? coming from, and how did you scratch it, if you will?
Well, I was I was always I mean, I learned how to read on comic books when I was, like, 3,
So what
just
was your
reading,
flavor at 3? What was your flavor for comics at 3?
Charlie Brown and,
Charlie. Ah,
Charlie
nice,
Brown and Superman, yeah, those were my 2 growing up,
nice.
and, yeah, and then I think I read, the Byrne Claremont X-Men when I was, like, 5, or I was way too young, like, Wolverine scared the hell out of me when I was a kid. But I kept reading. So, I always I was a big reader, and I always wanted to write comics. I wasn't sure how to go about that, and I just like writing in general. So I get this job at this newspaper writing about books because I love books, and from there, like they assigned me to cover the 2012 presidential campaign between Obama and Romney, and
Ooh.
yeah, so I went around the country following them, and I'm really interested in politics and all that. So that was super great. And eventually, along the way, Tom Pyre, who's the editor in chief now of Ahoy Comics, but he was also the editor of Grant Morrison's Doom Patrol at Vertigo. He
Yeah,
wrote a
great book.
bunch of great comics. Great guy. He was living in Seattle, and he really liked my writing for The Stranger, my books writing, and when he started Ahoy, he reached out to me and asked me, well, first, if I knew any artists in Seattle who might like to draw comics, but he also asked me if I had any pitches. And so I
Okay.
pitched him my first book, Planet of the Nerds, which was an idea I'd had for a long time, and he liked it, and we got started. So I was kind of a late bloomer. I mean, I was in my 40s, but
Wow, it's never too late, kiddo. Look, I love
that's
it.
right.
Look, in your 40s and you start your comic book career. I mean, how much that's inspiring, bro. Also, hey, listen, I'm obviously in my 40s. It's black up here, but it's white here.
It's distinguished.
Hey, hey, listen, that's what I told wifey, right? Because she always
Yeah,
tells me, "Hey, can you dye it?" I'm like, "Nah, man, it's distinguished. It
yeah,
looks
yeah,
it's salt and pepper still. It ain't that bad. Come on now, stop
yeah,
it."
yeah. It's just a little wisdom, right?
So where did that inspiration come, from that first project, Planet of the Nerds? You said you had it. I mean, where did the inspiration come from, and why that specific, narrative, if you will?
Well, I was thinking about like Back to the Future and things like that, because I loved that when I was a kid. And I was thinking about how, if Back to the Future had taken place now, it would have been like, my childhood would have been the time they were coming from. So
Uh,
Planet of the Nerds is about three jocks from the 1980s who get frozen accidentally cryogenically frozen, and then they get thawed in the modern day. And they're shocked. Like the first thing they come across is a comic book convention. So they think the world's been taken over by nerds, which it has. And so they don't know what to do. It's like for them, it's like a dystopian hellhole because like everybody's got computers. They're like nerds, and it's horrible and all that. So it was a really neat way to think about things that have changed over time. Because like one of the first things they do is they get to this convention and they get into a fist fight, and somebody calls the cops. And I was just thinking, uh, like what the difference is between the cops in the 1980s and like this, SWAT team comes out and they just start like tear gassing everyone, and I'm like, oh my god, we live in like a dystopian future. So it was a great way to sort of compare and contrast the times, and
Cracked
so
me up because what I think about is, you remember that Hulk Hogan movie when he was about to punch somebody and he goes, "You hit me, I'm gonna sue you." He goes, "What do you mean?" He goes, "I'm gonna call my lawyer." Like, go ahead and he wasn't even going to get into it. Like, "I'll sue you, kid. Don't even."
yeah.
That was a bigger insult than "I'll beat you up." I love.
Yeah,
All right,
so
so you do Planet of the Nerds, and then now you get into Snelson. I mean, again,
uh-huh.
this is right. I mean, is this your second project or is this your third? What is
Yeah, I've
this?
done I've done some short stories for Ahoy, but this is the second full length book for him. Yeah. Yep.
Nice. And how is that process for you? Coming into it later in life, and
Mhm.
now, okay, I'm writing comics. Was it an easy transition for you to kind of understand and navigate the scope of doing this now, or this landscape?
Yeah, it was. I think, I wrote a lot of comics in high school with friends of mine, like we did mini comics and stuff like that. So I was kind of familiar with the process and how it worked. But yeah, it was pretty easy. Tom was a great, editor. He helped me through all this, and he's been working in comics since the '80s. So he had all the, he was able to answer any question I had, and he sort of guided me through the process. And like there is no better drug for me than getting a page back from an artist. It's just like it was like the dopamine levels were off. It was like the top of my head blew off the first time, because it's always so much better than I imagined it would look, and so I just got hooked right away.
Like who needs the license to go buy illegal weed when you have
Yeah,
beautiful comic book art coming your way? You know what I mean?
it's amazing. Yeah, my inbox is my dealer right now. It's amazing. So
Hey man, hopefully that dealer ain't charging you some crazy prices. All right,
no,
so
my dealer's paying me. That's the
I love it. So when it came to building your team, because you said that actually, do you know any artists? There's that. Did you have to build your creative team? Like your artists and your letterer and your colorist and all that.
Yeah, well, Ahoy is very writer first, right? Like it comes, you have a pitch, and then you sort of assemble the team around the pitch. And so for like Planet of the Nerds, it was really important that we get somebody who's great at facial expressions. So we got an artist named Alan Robinson who's spectacular for that. But then Snelson was a little more, like you said, slice of life, a little more realism.
Yeah.
But you don't want to have a comic that's all talking heads, right?
No,
So
no.
so Tom knew this artist named Fred Harper, who's done some work for DC, and he's also a political cartoonist and all that. And he's just amazing because he does these, like, it's almost a caricature, right? But it's also super realistic. But then he can do some weird stuff that, like, he can make like a bunch of people sitting around a table at a diner look like the freakiest thing you've seen in a comic book in years.
I
Um,
love it.
so it's really important that we get somebody great. And once we had Fred on board, he really he's a huge comedy nerd. He lives in New York, and he knows the scene. You should have him on the podcast. He's in with the stand-up comedy crowd. So
Oh,
he was the only person. Once I started writing, he was the only person who could have drawn it, and it's just amazing. And then the colorist, we have Lee Loffridge, and it's tricky finding somebody who can work with Fred, because he like I said, it's the realism fantasy thing, right? And so we had to get somebody who made the weird stuff look normal and the normal stuff look weird. And Lee is great at that. Like if he was working on a movie set, he would be like an ace light artist. Because
talk
he's just
about weird. This cover, man, I'm like, what the hell?
amazing.
This cover cracked me the hell up. I'm like, okay, this is Snelson, folks, right here.
That's
I
him.
mean,
That's the man.
I ain't too far away from having that type of top. Let me tell you. But bro, with the cow, he's basically almost talking into the cow's butthole, if you will.
Yep. Yep.
Not the cow taking shots. I mean,
Mhm.
great. This image here is like, yeah, is he getting screwed? Because that's what it looks like to me. It's like, what's going on here, bro? Who is Snelson? Who kind of inspired this character that you created here? He's great, but obviously, we'll get into it. But he's gonna go through some shit, apparently.
He is, yeah, yeah. I was thinking about a lot of people I went to high school with, actually, back in Maine, on Facebook, who are sort of stuck in the '90s, right? Like they think the '90s were the best time ever, and all that. And it's like, well, no, you were just young, and uh, so like I just really wanted to have somebody. So Snelson is a stand-up comedian who almost hit it big in the 1990s.
Oh
He had a pilot made. It was, everybody was trying to find the next Seinfeld, so he had a pilot made. He maybe went out on a date with Janine Garofalo, because that's what all the rumors
yeah,
say.
they mentioned that. That was
Yeah.
hilarious.
And then he just didn't make it, and he's just been like on this downward trajectory ever since. And like a lot of people I know, especially a lot of, like, 40-ish year old white guys on Facebook, it's not them who did the wrong, like they're not they're the aggrieved party, and everybody else is the cause of that failure. So I just really wanted to sort of like go after sort of my own generation's failings, I think,
Yeah, yeah.
with this character, this sort of self-important, I'm great, so obviously the whole world is wrong, kind of a thing. And so, yeah, that's the reason behind Snelson, I think.
So again, you did this as a 5-issue series, right?
Mhm.
And again, the way to explain is the misadventures of a washed-up comedian whose career peaked when Dawson's Creek was still on air. Also, that's my wife's favorite, one of my wife's favorite shows. I never
Uh-huh,
watched one with her because I'm like so anti all that stuff. Let me tell you.
uh-huh.
I love it, and the book is coming out August 4th. I mean, you even had Patton Oswalt talk about this. I mean,
Yeah.
wow.
Yeah, that was a big deal. Fred knew him from the comedy scene, and and yeah, it was pretty huge. I was very excited when I saw that because he liked it. He got what we were trying to do, because it's touchy, right? Because it's a book about a loser. Like, I don't think he's a hero, so like you don't want to make him too sympathetic, but you also want people to read it and have fun. So it was a tricky balance writing this
You
one.
definitely get fun. You see him perform his stand up, a couple of lines. What you see is his shtick that he carries across multiple shows, but then you also get to meet his team because he has a team, and
Yeah.
he's trying to sell it now. Oh yeah, we're diverse. We're a diverse team. I mean,
Uh-huh.
everybody trying to push something on narratives because they think that narrative is what's gonna sell for them. So how
Mhm.
did you come up with that kind of idea for him to be a part of that?
Well, I was thinking, I was just thinking about the way that some comedians, or even some, like, corporations, right? It's like, put the young kids in the front on social media, and they don't even have health insurance, right? Like, but you're using them as sort of a human shield
What's
to
health
to
insurance?
yeah. Exactly, and that's what the kids are getting. So yeah, in this at the beginning of the book, he's got a group of young and diverse comedians who are on tour with him, and they need the exposure that his bigger name can give them, and he's using them as like cover to say, look, I'm cool, don't cancel me. And so he calls it the Get Woke or Die Broke tour, and then he just starts screwing over the kids, one by one. It's kind of like a horror movie a little bit, and just the way he's screwing up these kids' lives in an attempt to stay relevant.
I love
So
that. When I read that shit, that was again the comic book has those moments where you will find yourself laughing out loud, and that was one of them.
thank
You
you.
know, I mean, get woke, be broke. I'm like, holy shit, what? I mean, I've actually seen this, on social media, but to see it from this narrative as a comedy kind of tour trope, making
Mhm,
fun.
mhm,
I love it because nowadays, comedy is under attack.
mhm.
You do come from a political perspective. How do you feel about that? Do you feel that as well?
Well,
That companies under attack because maybe they don't understand the humor, or maybe the humor is just I don't know, just beyond some people. Maybe I don't know.
I mean, it's tricky, right? There's a lot of things at play that I think get mixed up with each other, right? Like, I think that, like, people like to say that, that, like, Louis CK was canceled, and that gets thrown in with the you can't make a joke anymore. But really,
Yeah,
Louis CK was like, he showed his junk to a bunch of women without their permission, and so a lot of people decided they didn't like that. He's still making money. Like, he's not been, like, erased from the universe, right? Like, he lives in Paris. He's got a girlfriend. He's making a ton of money doing stand up across Europe right now. So, like, if you want to see more Louis C.K. comedy, then you can. It doesn't mean that he's a victim of cancel culture. I think that there are, situations where people don't feel safe saying something that they think, and I think that can be dangerous for sure, right?
I
I think
agree.
that's what you're talking about, right?
Exactly. Exactly, where you can't speak your mind. I mean, again, it's humor, folks. I mean, not that I mean it, but if you make sometimes making fun of a situation does bring it to the forefront, you know.
Yeah,
Just with humor,
yeah,
not that it's funny, but you could laugh at the situation and be like, okay, this is the situation. It's funny because it's just kind of effed up, like, wow, this is really still going on today. But of
yeah.
course, you could use that as an avenue to really bring about discussion, I think. But a lot of people is like, you can't even discuss this in a humorous way because no, now you're being offensive. Um,
Uh-huh.
and
Yeah.
I'm a fan
Well,
of comedy, always been, and I would defend comedy, to the day I die because I get it. I mean, it's just making light of situations in order to bring it into conversation. That's all it
yeah,
is.
yeah. But I think it's also, it's also changing. Like if sometimes you watch a movie from like the late 90s or something and there's like something like super homophobic and the joke is just like, oh, gay people are funny or something. You know what I mean?
I
Like
get it.
it does change over time. And so like I think that there's something to be said for like I'm going to make a lazy joke where the joke is someone's, gender or whatever. And that I don't think that can be the punchline, but you can make any number of like really good jokes about these things and it totally works. So it's
I agree. See, because I don't believe in that cancel culture stuff because I think people need to also understand when the content came out and what was going on then.
yeah,
So, don't cancel it. Learn from it and see how we've grown from then till now. Where
yeah,
now is not okay. That was okay then, and that's what it was. Not that it was okay, but that's what it was then. And
yeah,
then you see the growth of change that
yeah.
we evolved into the now, right?
Right, right, right. Yeah.
To hide that doesn't mean it didn't happen. You
Right,
understand me? So let
right.
it be shown. I mean, are you down with that? Like with that kind of mentality? Like, yo, that's what it was then. Let it be shown so you can see the growth that we've had since then, though. Now it's not
Absolutely,
okay.
yeah.
I'm not telling you it's okay, but it's like that was then just a comparison for comparison's sake. If you delete it, I mean, what do you have to compare to? Are you going to again try to sell the narrative that we were politically correct back then, which we weren't?
Right, yeah, yeah. That it doesn't you can't like cover over the past. I mean, if you look at like I think Blazing Saddles is hilarious, right? Like I don't think
Yeah, but that shit would not be able to come out today.
well, yeah, but at the same time, Jordan Peele couldn't have made Get Out when Blazing Saddles was, you know what I mean? So it's like a continuum. But I don't think we should like throw Blazing Saddles in a vault or something and never show it to anyone. I just think it's, like it was made in a specific time when these things were funny and some of them are still funny because they're really great jokes.
Listen,
Um,
a lot of these stereotypes, most people hate to admit it, but a lot of the stereotypes are true. Puerto Ricans do like knives. We do like to throw chanclas, our moms, you know what I mean? We do love our rice and beans. I mean, there's some truth to those things. So, you know, laugh at them. It's just, come on now. I don't get insulted like that. I'm a child from that era. So,
yeah.
I always tell my daughters, like, you grew up in the zero generation because she was born, what, 2001? You know what I mean?
Oh well.
Me, I'm a dude from the 75. So I grew up as video games were coming into the forefront, right?
Uh-huh.
We were still that generation that played outside. And then computers came to our lives when we were in our teens in high school, right? So,
Yeah, I was 76, so
we grew up into that digital generation, though. You know what I
yeah.
mean? So,
Mhm.
we navigate it. We are that last generation that knows what it is to play outside and also have the digital landscape.
Yeah.
Whereas nowadays, kids just, all they got is the digital landscape.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. And we get into that a little bit in this book too, how like it can make you weird if it's there's a lot of like digital, radicalization and stuff like that, So it's tough. You got to like watch your Minecraft game to make sure your kid doesn't become a Nazi or something.
Yeah, and it's real because even the gaming communities nowadays, they having their own even e-commerce, if you will. It's becoming its own society. You know
Yeah,
what
yeah,
I mean?
yeah.
It's insane what social and gaming and comics and movies. We all, instead of it putting us together, it's kind of dividing us further apart. That's not
Yeah,
something we want. That's kind of the comic Crusaders narrative here to bring everything together.
yeah.
One stop. Why not? So, and I want to thank you for creating such a fun book. That's a slice of life.
Thanks.
You're talking about comedy. You have that generational type thing going on as well. Because you got an older comedian with the young cast, and how do they mash? I really can't wait to see because again, it seems like Snelson is going to go through something because
Mhm.
again, folks, when you read this first issue, something's going on with him, and at least towards the end you find this out. It's like, okay, like how much worse can his life get? Yeah, it seems like it's about to.
Uh-huh.
Unfortunately.
Yeah, yeah, it does. It's we take him on a journey, and maybe he has some self-reflection and maybe he doesn't, that's the question with this guy.
That
What's that?
journey, with that journey that he has in
Hmm.
this, does that come from anywhere as well? Have you maybe had someone in your life that maybe had gone through something similar, and you could kind of say, okay, let me take pieces of that?
Um, a little bit, yeah, yeah. I mean, actually, after, yeah, it's something that I have been on the sidelines of, and I've seen people have, health scares and things like that. There's some of that in the book for sure, and I think that's something that happens more. When you get to be, I guess you were born a year before me, when you get to be our age, like you have friends who go in the hospital for something and it's like, oh shit, this is serious. Like
Yeah.
this isn't like falling off a bike when you're 23 or something like that, so and I think that's part of the story of like being stuck in this thing where you're not willing to accept that you're getting older. I think you're at some point you've got to, because your friends start getting sick, and like it's
I
just
hear
like
you.
a,
I've
yeah,
lost other friends already that I grew
yeah.
up with, some younger than I, if you will, by a year or two. And to see what they've gone through, and then I'm still here, you feel that hurt, like, damn, such a young guy
Yeah,
with a family. I mean, it's listen, life ain't easy.
yeah, yeah.
Unfortunately, especially when you have a group of friends, and you grew up together and things just start going on. COVID hasn't been easy on anyone.
Mhm.
Uh,
Yeah,
I've met folks that have passed, those that have survived, and it's been a tough year, at least
yeah,
for me.
yeah,
And
me
again,
too.
you mentioned what you've been going through, but it obviously kept you productive in creating a cool story with Snelson. A 5 issue series is going to come out from Ahoy. You know what I mean?
Mhm.
Again, for me, it's that slice of life. It has that comedy. If you guys are fans of both, I mean, I think you guys have something very special here, Paul.
No, thank you.
I
Thanks.
want to thank you for being so creative, and bringing us something again that's different. Because again, yeah, I love my superheroes, but that gets stale over time, and you want something more. So you're bringing this whole other thing to us. So thank you for that. And
Thank you. Thanks.
no, no, for real, bro. Again, the idea that Snelson, again, I'm just looking at the press release. Snelson is struggling with the idea that he's a victim of cancel culture. I mean, something that's so big nowadays, as we just discussed, or
Mhm.
even a guy altogether. But I doubt that, because again, the character seems to be so cool. I appreciate that.
Thank you.
So what do we have else going on? I mean, you got the 5 issue series from Snelson, right?
Mhm.
That you're doing. I mean, what can we expect more from the constant verse? Are you gonna
Uh,
stay constant on giving us some good stuff?
Hopefully, yeah. I'm working on something that I can't talk about just yet. I can say I think that it's kind of the opposite of Snelson, which is good, Like I wanna alternate. I want to do some like fun, lighthearted stuff along with the satire, the slice of life stuff. So yeah, I'm gonna keep going at that. Last year we sold the movie rights, the option for Planet of the Nerds to Paramount.
Did? Oh,
Yeah,
snap. Congrats, kiddo. That's
thanks. Yeah,
right here, bro.
yes.
Actually, let's do it right there. There you go. Awesome stuff.
Yeah, so that was fun, and so hopefully, like I didn't have any interest in writing the screenplay or anything like that because I just love comics. I just want to keep
Yeah,
working with comics, and I'm hoping that I'll be able to do more as it keeps going. Because like I was saying before we get on here, like there's no better drug than getting a new comics page in from an artist in the inbox. It just like
yeah.
it never gets old for me. Like seeing what Fred like does with one of my scripts. It's just like I write it out and I think I've got some idea of what it's going to look like, and then it's always like 100 times. It's like the top of my head just blows off. So
I
as
love.
long as I can keep chasing that dragon, I'll be I'm down for it. Yeah.
Keep chasing the dragon, brother, because I love what you're doing, man. You already made me a fan for sure.
Oh,
I
thank you.
enjoy this kind of stuff. So before we go, what's a piece of advice that you would love to leave, with somebody that maybe is trying to become a writer, especially doing this type of narrative as opposed to a superhero narrative? Like, what would you tell them to do?
Well, I mean, like I said, my story is not the traditional comic writer story. So I think it's just, if you love to write, then write as much as you can, and don't worry. Like, if you can't get a foot in the door at the comic book company, then just keep writing other things. Like, there's I've been a journalist for a really long time, and I know it doesn't seem like it would make sense, but writing a news story has lessons about structure that will inform you when you write comics later. So it's like, if you want to write, just write. Try to make money at it however you can, and then eventually, just keep trying. I think if you learn how to be a professional, and to like be on time, and to do the job, even if your heart's not in it when you're writing a news story about I don't know, a bookstore closing or something like that, and you just don't want to write about sad people anymore or whatever. If you just keep doing it, and you just keep at it, I think that it's you can it really helps you. Writing anything helps the next piece get better.
Excellent. There you go, man. Wise words from
Thanks.
a fantastic writer that you definitely need to be aware of and put on your radar, especially via the Ahoy Comics, Panel of the Nerds, Snelson. So, please make sure to follow Paul on Twitter at paulconstant.com, right? He also has a website, all right? paulconstant.com. Make sure to
Mm-hmm.
check that out. And please go visit your LCS right now, because of course support your local comic shops, because without them,
100%.
we need them. We need those community centers, if you will. So
Uh-huh. Absolutely.
Snelson is coming out August 4th, but you can still pre-order it now. All right. So make sure you do that. It's a 5-issue series. So put that whole run on your pull list. I guarantee that you will love it. Trust me. All right. It's a great book. Paul, you've been an amazing guest. Thank you for sharing your time and your knowledge and just giving us some insight into the book and your creative process. I appreciate it.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm such a big fan of the podcast. I'm going to be geeking out about this all week. I really
Uh,
appreciate it.
Awesome. Well, we're going to be sharing it all over the place. It's already going to be live on obviously YouTube and Twitch. And folks, make sure to follow us on comiccrusaders.com, undercovercapes.com, our extended podcast family. And please make sure to also download our Google Play app store, an app that's available on the Play Store today. Comic Crusaders app is everything Comic Crusaders all in one spot. Our YouTube, our podcast, our website, and even our forthcoming web store. So be on the lookout for that. Shout out to Lucas, that's working on that, our retail officer. Paul, once again, thank you for your time. I'm going to just repeat
Thank you
again.
so much.
Follow Paul on Twitter, Paul Constant. His website, paulconstant.com. Yeah, he keeps it constant, doesn't he?
He does.
And obviously, comedy is dying, a 5-issue series from the amazing publisher that is Ahoy Comics. You get independent and kicking ass for real. There are several titles that I enjoy. Shout out to Tom Pyre. Shout out to Hannah and to David from Superfan as well for hooking this opportunity up for me to speak to a homie that's after my heart again, from my same age group. He fuels me. I love it. All right. So, Paul, thanks again, bro. You really rule. I really appreciate the time. All right.
Thank you so much, man.
No, bless, bro. And everybody, you better order that book. Wepa para que tu sepa. It's Almega. And I'm out. Later, my family.
Thank you. We hope you've enjoyed this Comic Crusaders production. For real-time news on all things pop culture, please feel free to follow us on social media. For articles, original content, merchandise, and more, please go to www.comiccrusaders.com. Also follow along with all of the websites of the Comic Crusaders family. As always, if you like this content, please click like and subscribe to the Comic Crusaders YouTube channel.